Some people walk into your life and change everything. The terrifying part is when it feels like they already have. I wasn't supposed to be working the VIP floor that night. My shift had ended 43 minutes earlier, and every muscle in my body reminded me of it. The luxury hotel overlooking downtown Seattle shimmered with gold light and polished marble. The kind of place where a single night's stay cost more than my monthly rent. I was 27 years old, juggling 2 jobs while helping my younger brother through community college, and the only reason I was still there was because another employee had called out sick. So I stayed. Extra hours meant extra money. Extra money meant fewer bills waiting on my kitchen counter. Simple. At least that's what I thought. I was replacing fresh flowers in one of the private executive suites when I heard footsteps in the hallway. Heavy. Deliberate. Not rushed. Not uncertain. The kind of footsteps that belonged to someone who expected doors to open before they reached them. I glanced at the clock mounted above the minibar. Nearly 10:30. Whoever was arriving this late must have been important. I adjusted the white lilies in the crystal vase and reached for my cart. My name tag reflected briefly in the suite's floor-to-ceiling windows. Maya Brooks. Housekeeping. Nothing remarkable. Nothing worth remembering. Then the door opened. I expected a businessman. Maybe a celebrity. Instead, a tall man stepped into the room, followed by 2 others who immediately stopped outside the doorway. The first thing I noticed was the silence. Not actual silence. The city still glowed beyond the glass. Air conditioning still hummed softly overhead, but somehow the room itself felt quieter. Like the air had paused. The man standing near the entrance wore a charcoal suit tailored so perfectly it looked like it had been made for him alone. Black hair. Sharp features. Calm eyes that scanned the room with effortless awareness. He couldn't have been much older than 35. Everything about him projected control. Confidence. The kind of presence that made people instinctively step aside without knowing why. His gaze landed on me. And then something strange happened. He froze. Completely. The room seemed to narrow around that single moment. I remember the vase slipping slightly in my hands. I remember wondering whether I had accidentally done something wrong. Maybe I wasn't supposed to be there. Maybe the suite wasn't ready. Maybe he thought I was someone else. But none of those explanations felt right. Because he wasn't looking at me with annoyance. He wasn't looking at me with confusion. He was looking at me like he'd just seen a ghost. Seconds passed. Long enough to become uncomfortable. Long enough for me to feel my heartbeat in my throat. One of the men outside shifted his weight. Another quietly spoke his name. Mr. Saito? No response. Ethan Saito. I'd heard the name before. Everyone had. Not from newspapers or television interviews. Men like him rarely appeared in public. His name traveled through whispers, through rumors, through stories people told carefully. Yet none of those stories explained why he was staring at me like the world had tilted beneath his feet. Finally, I forced a polite smile. "I'm sorry," I said softly. "I can come back later if you'd prefer." The words seemed to break whatever spell had trapped him. He blinked once, then twice, as if remembering where he was. But his eyes never left mine. "No," he said quietly. His voice was smooth, controlled, yet something beneath it sounded shaken. "Stay." I should have left anyway. Every instinct told me to push my cart into the hallway and disappear. Instead, I stood there holding a vase of flowers while one of the most powerful men in the city looked at me as though he had forgotten how to breathe. And the strangest part? For reasons I couldn't explain, I felt exactly the same. I did not sleep much that night. The rain tapped softly against my apartment window long after midnight, and every time I closed my eyes, I saw the same thing. Not his suit. Not the expensive watch on his wrist. Not even the strange silence that seemed to follow him wherever he went. I saw his face when he looked at me. Shock. Recognition. Loss. It made no sense. Men like Ethan Saito did not look at women like me that way. By morning I had convinced myself I was overthinking everything. People had bad days. Maybe he had mistaken me for someone else. Maybe he had received terrible news before entering the suite. Maybe the entire thing had nothing to do with me at all. That explanation lasted until noon. I was organizing fresh linens in the service hallway when my supervisor nearly ran toward me. Her cheeks were flushed. Her eyes looked wider than usual. Maya, she said. Did you do something yesterday? My stomach tightened immediately. What do you mean? She handed me a cream-colored envelope. Heavy paper. Expensive. The kind of stationery nobody used anymore. My name was written across the front in elegant handwriting. This arrived for you an hour ago. I stared at it. Who sent it? She shook her head. No idea. After she left, I carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a single card. Thank you for your professionalism last evening. The flowers were beautiful. No signature. No company logo. Nothing else. Most people would have thought it was harmless. A simple thank you note. Yet my pulse quickened the moment I touched the card, because tucked behind it was something else. A photograph. Old. Faded. Creased from age. I turned it over slowly. A little girl stood beside a playground swing set. Maybe 6 years old. Dark curls. Bright smile. She looked vaguely familiar. Not because I knew her. Because she looked like me. My breath caught. The resemblance was impossible to ignore. The shape of the eyes. The curve of the smile. Even the small birthmark near her left eyebrow. On the back someone had written a date. 22 years ago. I sat down immediately. The room suddenly felt too warm. My hands trembled as I stared at the photograph again and again. Could not be me. It was impossible. I had no pictures from before age 7. The foster system had misplaced most of my records years ago. Every document from my early childhood contained missing information. Missing names. Missing addresses. Missing memories. Yet somehow this girl looked exactly like the child version of me that existed only in fragments. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. I looked up. One of the front desk employees stood there. Maya. Yeah. There is someone asking about you downstairs. My stomach dropped. Who? He hesitated. He would not say. 20 minutes later, I stepped into the lobby. The massive crystal chandelier glittered overhead. Guests moved across polished marble floors. Conversations echoed softly around me. Then I saw him. Ethan stood near the windows overlooking the city. Alone this time. Hands in his pockets. Watching the rain slide down the glass. The moment I appeared, he turned. Those calm eyes found mine instantly, as if he had known exactly when I would arrive. Neither of us moved. Then his gaze lowered briefly to the photograph still clutched in my hand. And for the second time in less than 24 hours, all the color disappeared from his face. I could not tell whether the pounding in my chest came from fear or curiosity. Ethan's eyes remained fixed on the photograph in my hand, and for a moment the entire lobby seemed to fade into the background. The conversations, the rolling suitcases, the soft piano music drifting from hidden speakers. None of it felt real anymore. Only him. Only that photograph. Only the strange connection neither of us understood. He took a slow breath. Where did you get that? His voice was calm, but something beneath it sounded dangerously close to emotion. I looked down at the picture. It was inside the envelope. He nodded once, almost to himself. Then his gaze returned to mine. May I see it? Every reasonable instinct told me to say no. I barely knew this man. Yet somehow I found myself stepping closer and handing him the photograph. His fingers closed carefully around the edges, like it was something fragile, something precious. For several seconds he simply stared at it. Then something changed in his expression. Not shock this time. Not confusion. Recognition. The kind that comes from finding something you thought was gone forever. That is impossible, he whispered. What is? I asked. His jaw tightened. He looked up immediately, as though he had revealed more than intended. Nothing. I almost laughed. That did not sound like nothing. A faint smile touched one corner of his mouth before disappearing. Again. It was the first time I had seen any warmth in him. The first time he looked less like a man carved from stone. You deserve answers, he said quietly. Unfortunately, I do not have them yet. Yet. The word settled heavily between us. Not if. Yet. As if answers already existed somewhere. Waiting. Do you know who that girl is? I asked. He hesitated. No, the answer came too quickly. Too smoothly. He was hiding something. I knew it instantly. The same way I knew he was not the kind of man who lied often, which somehow made this lie even more noticeable. Before I could press further, his phone vibrated. He glanced at the screen. The smallest flicker of irritation crossed his face. Then it vanished. I have to leave. Disappointment hit me before I could stop it. Why disappointment? I did not know. Nothing about this situation made sense. Ethan carefully returned the photograph. Keep that safe. Why? His eyes held mine. Because someone kept it for 22 years. A chill ran down my arms. 22 years. Exactly the date written on the back. Before I could ask another question, he stepped away. Then paused. Maya. Hearing my name in his voice felt strangely familiar. Yeah. For the first time since we met, uncertainty appeared in his eyes. Just for a second. Then it was gone. Do you remember anything before age 7? My breath caught. Nobody knew that about me. Not my coworkers. Not my neighbors. Not anyone outside my family. How do you know that? I asked. But he was already walking toward the exit. Rain streaked the glass doors behind him. His security team fell into step beside him. He never answered my question. He simply disappeared into the gray afternoon, leaving me standing in the center of the lobby holding a photograph from a life I could not remember. And for the first time in years, I found myself wondering whether my missing memories had been lost at all, or hidden. That night, I pulled every box out of my closet, every folder, every document I had collected over the years. The rain continued tapping against the apartment windows while old papers covered my living room floor. Adoption records, school records, medical forms. Most of them contained the same frustrating gaps. Unknown, unavailable, incomplete. I had spent years accepting those empty spaces because I believed there was nothing I could do about them. But now those missing pieces felt different. They felt intentional. Near midnight, I found a cardboard box I had not opened in years. It belonged to my adoptive mother. After she passed away, I packed away most of her things because looking through them hurt too much. Dust coated the lid. My hands hesitated before lifting it. Inside were birthday cards, old photographs, letters, receipts, ordinary fragments of a life. Then I found a small leather journal. The cover was worn. The pages yellowed with age. I opened it carefully. At first it was exactly what I expected. Grocery lists, appointments, family notes. Then a date caught my attention. 22 years ago. The same year written on the photograph. My pulse quickened. I kept reading. The entry was short. Only a few lines. Yet every word seemed to echo inside my chest. Maya had another nightmare tonight. She keeps talking about the rain. About a boy she cannot find. Doctor says memory recovery should never be forced. We will wait. I stared at the page. Read it again. Then again. A boy. Rain. Something stirred deep inside my mind. A sensation more than a memory. Water falling from a dark sky. Tiny hands gripping mine. A voice calling my name. The image vanished before I could grab hold of it. I pressed my fingers against my temples. Breathing slowly. The room suddenly felt smaller. At the bottom of the page, another sentence had been added weeks later. She no longer remembers him. Perhaps that is for the best. Him. The boy. My heart hammered harder. I turned pages frantically, searching for more. Most entries revealed nothing. Then a folded piece of paper slipped free and landed on the floor. I unfolded it. It was a newspaper clipping. Small. Old. Faded almost beyond recognition. The headline mentioned a devastating hotel fire that had occurred more than 2 decades earlier. Several families had been evacuated. Many records had been lost. I scanned the article quickly. Then my eyes stopped on a photograph. My breath disappeared. Standing near emergency responders was a young boy with dark hair. Maybe 7 years old. His face was partially obscured. The image was grainy. Yet something about him felt familiar. Terribly familiar. On the back of the clipping, written in my mother's handwriting, were 4 words. Find out who survived. My phone rang suddenly. The sound nearly made me jump. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. Almost. Instead I answered. Hello. Silence. Then a woman's voice. Calm. Careful. Maya Brooks. Yes. Another pause. You need to stop looking into the past. Every muscle in my body tightened. Who is this? The caller ignored the question. Some memories stay buried for a reason. Then the line disconnected. I stared at the screen. My reflection looked back at me from the dark glass. Confused. Uneasy. Wide awake. Slowly, my gaze shifted toward the newspaper clipping still resting on my table. Toward the blurry photograph of the boy I somehow could not stop thinking about. And for the first time a terrifying possibility entered my mind. What if Ethan was not searching for answers? What if he already knew them? The next 3 days felt different. Not dramatic. Not obvious. Just wrong in ways I could not explain. Small things began happening. The same silver sedan appeared outside my apartment twice. A man in a navy jacket seemed to be standing near the hotel entrance every morning when I arrived for work. Whenever I looked directly at him, he would walk away. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe it was paranoia fueled by too little sleep and too many unanswered questions. But deep down I knew better. Someone was paying attention. On Thursday afternoon, I decided to visit the public records office downtown. If my childhood records existed anywhere, there was a chance I could find something the adoption files had missed. The building smelled like old paper and stale coffee. Fluorescent lights buzzed softly overhead. After nearly 2 hours of searching, I found almost nothing useful. Most documents connected to the hotel fire had been sealed, misplaced, or transferred years earlier. Frustration settled heavily in my chest. I was gathering my things when an elderly clerk approached my table. She glanced at the file in front of me, then at the newspaper clipping. Her expression changed immediately. "Where did you get this?" she asked quietly. I hesitated. "Why?" The woman lowered herself into the chair across from me. "Because I remember that fire." My pulse quickened. "You do?" She nodded slowly. "I worked here back then." Suddenly every sound in the room seemed to disappear. "Do you remember the children?" I asked. Her eyes narrowed as she studied the photograph. "Some of them." She pointed toward the blurry image of the boy. "Especially him." My breath caught. Who was he? The woman opened her mouth to answer, then stopped. Her gaze shifted past my shoulder. I turned instinctively. A man stood near the entrance. Dark suit. Expression unreadable. Watching us. The same feeling from the anonymous phone call returned immediately. The clerk's face lost color. When I looked back at her, she was already shaking her head. "I am sorry," she whispered. "I should not have said anything." "Wait. You need to leave this alone." The exact same words. The exact same warning. Before I could stop her, she stood and hurried away through a staff-only doorway. I sat frozen for several seconds. Then I looked back toward the entrance. The man was gone. Outside, rain had started falling again. Thick gray clouds covered the city. I stepped onto the sidewalk feeling more confused than ever. My phone vibrated. One new message. No name attached. No number visible. Just a single sentence. "Stop searching before someone gets hurt." My stomach tightened. The message disappeared seconds later. Deleted automatically. I stared at the blank screen. Then another notification appeared almost immediately. Different sender. This one had a name. Ethan Saito. I opened it. There were only 6 words. "We need to talk. Tonight." Attached beneath the message was an address I recognized instantly. The location was not an office. Not a hotel. Not a public place. It was a private estate overlooking Puget Sound. The kind of property people only saw in magazines. I looked at the rain falling around me, then back at the message. For 3 days I had been chasing answers. Now it seemed the answers were finally coming. The question was why Ethan had decided tonight was the night to tell me the truth. By 7:30 that evening, I was standing outside iron gates that looked tall enough to keep the entire world away. Rain drifted across Puget Sound in silver sheets, blurring the distant lights scattered along the shoreline. I almost turned around twice during the drive. Every instinct warned me that meeting Ethan alone was a terrible idea. Yet curiosity had become stronger than caution. The gates opened before I reached the intercom. Someone had been expecting me. The driveway curved through towering evergreens before revealing the estate itself. It was beautiful in a quiet way. Not flashy. Not designed to impress strangers. Large windows glowed warmly against the dark sky. The house felt more like a private sanctuary than the headquarters of a powerful man. A woman greeted me at the entrance and guided me through a hallway lined with bookshelves and framed photographs. Most of the pictures showed landscapes. Mountains. Oceans. Forests. Very few people appeared in them. The silence inside the house felt deliberate. Peaceful. Almost lonely. When the woman opened the study door, Ethan was standing beside a fireplace. He had removed his suit jacket. For the first time, he looked less like an untouchable figure from whispered stories, and more like a man carrying the weight of something he could no longer hide. He gestured toward a chair. "Thank you for coming." I remained standing. "You said we needed to talk." His eyes lowered briefly. "We do." Rain tapped softly against the windows. The fire crackled behind him. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Finally, he crossed the room and placed a thick folder on the desk between us. "Everything inside belongs to you." My heart immediately accelerated. "What is it?" "The truth." I stared at the folder. Suddenly I was afraid to open it. Afraid that whatever waited inside would change everything. Ethan seemed to understand. "For years," he said quietly, "I searched for someone I thought I would never find." The words settled heavily between us. "Who?" I asked. His gaze met mine. "You." Every sound in the room disappeared. The rain. The fire. My own breathing. Gone. "That is impossible." "I know how it sounds." "No," I shook my head. "You do not understand. I do not even know you." Pain flickered across his face. Real pain. Gone almost as quickly as it appeared. That is exactly the problem. My hands trembled as I opened the folder. The first photograph nearly stopped my heart. A young boy stood beside a little girl beneath a red umbrella. Rain poured around them. The image was old but clear enough to see their faces. The boy was Ethan. There was no doubt. Even as a child, his eyes were unmistakable. The girl beside him looked exactly like the photograph I had received days earlier. Exactly like me. My pulse thundered in my ears. I turned to the next page. Then the next. More photographs. Newspaper articles. Adoption documents. Investigation reports spanning 2 decades. Every page pointed toward the same impossible conclusion. Ethan had not accidentally recognized me. He had been searching for me for 22 years. I looked up slowly. "Why?" My voice barely worked. Ethan stared at the photograph resting in my hands. Then he answered with a softness I had never heard before. "Because on the worst night of my life, you were the only person who stayed." For a long moment I could not speak. The photograph remained frozen in my hands while questions collided inside my head faster than I could process them. 22 years. 22 years of searching. 22 years of records, investigations, dead ends, and unanswered questions. All leading to me. The idea felt impossible. Yet the evidence sat directly in front of me. Ethan walked toward one of the windows overlooking the dark water beyond the estate. His reflection shimmered faintly against the glass. "The hotel fire happened during a charity conference," he said quietly. "My family was attending. Your mother was working there." I stared at him. "You knew my mother?" He nodded. "Only briefly." Rain streaked down the window beside him. I remember her smile. I remember how kind she was to everyone. Something tightened painfully in my chest. Most of my life my mother had existed. Only as a vague silhouette. A missing chapter. Hearing someone speak about her as a real person felt strangely overwhelming. Ethan continued. "That night everything became chaotic. People were separated. Records disappeared. Families were relocated. When it was over, nobody could find you." My eyes dropped toward another photograph inside the folder. This one showed 2 children sitting on a bench beneath a bright red umbrella. The little girl was smiling directly at the camera. The little boy sat beside her holding a paper crane. "We were friends?" I asked. Ethan looked down at the image. For the first time, a genuine smile appeared. Small. Sad. Real. Best friends. The words hit harder than I expected. A strange sensation stirred somewhere deep inside me. Not a memory exactly. More like an echo. Warm sunlight. Laughter. Tiny folded paper birds. I closed my eyes. For half a second I almost saw it. Then it vanished again. I still do not remember, I whispered. I know. There was no disappointment in his voice. Only patience. You do not have to. Silence settled between us. Comfortable this time. Thoughtful. The fire crackled softly behind me. Rain continued tapping against the windows. Then Ethan reached into his pocket. There is something else. My stomach immediately tightened. He placed a small object on the desk. A faded paper crane. Yellow with age. Delicate. Carefully preserved. I stared at it. Every breath seemed to slow. You made this, he said. My fingertips hovered above it. The moment I touched the paper, something flashed through my mind. A rainy afternoon. A child laughing. Tiny hands folding bright paper. A promise spoken beneath an umbrella. The image disappeared almost instantly, but this time it left something behind. Emotion. Familiarity. A sense of loss so sudden it stole my breath. Tears burned unexpectedly behind my eyes. I remember. The words escaped before I could stop them. Ethan froze. What? I swallowed hard. Not much. Just pieces. Hope appeared on his face so quickly it hurt to look at. Pieces are enough. My gaze remained fixed on the paper crane. Why did nobody tell me? Ethan's expression darkened slightly. Not with anger. With concern. Because someone wanted the past forgotten. The room seemed colder. Who? He hesitated. Longer than before. Then his eyes met mine. That is what I have been trying to find out. The clock above the fireplace crept past midnight, yet neither of us seemed eager to leave the room. The rain had softened outside, becoming a quiet whisper against the glass. I sat with the paper crane resting in my hands while Ethan studied the flames as if they contained answers neither of us could reach. There is something I never understood, I said finally. My voice sounded small in the silence. His attention shifted back to me immediately. What is it? I looked down at the old photographs scattered across the desk. If we were that close, if people knew where I was after the fire, why was I never found? Ethan exhaled slowly. It was the kind of breath someone takes before revealing a truth they wish did not exist. He walked to a cabinet near the far wall and removed another folder. Smaller. Older. The edges were worn from being opened too many times. When he placed it in front of me, I noticed his hand linger for a second before pulling away. Because every trail ended the same way. I opened the folder carefully. Inside were copies of letters, search requests, adoption inquiries, and investigator notes. Dozens of them. Maybe hundreds. The dates stretched across years. Every attempt to locate me had been redirected, delayed, or mysteriously closed. My chest tightened as I turned page after page. Someone had not simply lost track of me. Someone had made sure I stayed lost. Why would anyone do that? I whispered. Ethan's expression grew distant. I spent years asking the same question. I looked up. And he was quiet for a moment. I think your mother knew something important. The room suddenly felt colder. About what? I do not know. His honesty surprised me. Powerful men were supposed to have answers. Ethan seemed burdened by the ones he did not have. He moved toward the bookshelf and removed a framed photograph I had not noticed earlier. It showed two children standing beside a waterfront railing. The picture was faded, but the smiles were unmistakable. Mine. His. The sight stirred another flicker inside my memory. Seagulls. Salt air. A paper cup of hot chocolate warming my hands. I closed my eyes. The image sharpened for half a second before fading again. You remembered something. His voice was barely above a whisper. I nodded. The water. A faint smile touched his face. We used to go there every weekend. The warmth in his expression caught me off guard. For the first time since arriving, I saw not the powerful man people whispered about but the boy who had spent 22 years carrying a promise he never forgot. Then his phone vibrated. The sound broke the moment instantly. Ethan glanced at the screen. Every trace of warmth vanished. I had seen him serious before. This was different. Controlled. Alert. Dangerous in the way a storm becomes dangerous just before it arrives. What happened? I asked. He looked at the message for several seconds before locking the screen. Someone accessed records connected to the fire. My stomach dropped. Who? His eyes met mine. That is the problem. He slipped the phone into his pocket. The access request came from someone who has been officially dead for 20 years. The words settled over the room like cold rain. Officially dead for 20 years. I stared at Ethan, waiting for him to explain, hoping I had misunderstood. He crossed the room and placed his phone on the desk between us. A record request filled the screen. A name appeared at the top. My breath caught immediately. I knew that name. Not because I remembered it from childhood. Because I had seen it only hours earlier inside my adoptive mother's journal. The same name appeared beside a note she had written shortly after the fire. Ethan noticed my reaction instantly. You recognize it. I swallowed hard and nodded. My mother wrote it down. For a moment neither of us spoke. The realization seemed to hit us both at the same time. Whatever secret connected the fire, my missing past, and the years that followed had never truly disappeared. Someone had been protecting it. Or hiding it. Ethan slowly lowered himself into the chair across from me. For the first time since I met him, he looked tired. Not physically. Emotionally. Like a man carrying a question for so long that he had forgotten what life felt like without it. I spent years believing I had failed you, he said quietly. The honesty in his voice surprised me. Why? He looked toward the photographs scattered across the desk. Because I promised I would find you. My chest tightened. Another memory flickered. 2 children standing beneath a red umbrella. Rain falling around them. A little boy holding a paper crane. Promise. I could almost hear it. Almost. You were 7 years old, I whispered. Children make promises. Ethan smiled sadly. Some promises matter anyway. Silence filled the room. Comfortable. Warm. The kind of silence that exists only between people connected by something deeper than explanation. Outside, the rain finally stopped. Moonlight shimmered faintly across the water beyond the windows. For the first time in days, the pressure inside my chest began to ease. The missing pieces were not all back. I still did not know everything. But I knew enough. I knew I had not imagined the connection between us. I knew my past had been real. And I knew I was no longer searching alone. Ethan stood and walked toward one of the shelves. He returned carrying a small wooden box. Carefully, he placed it in front of me. Inside were dozens of paper cranes. Different colors. Different sizes. Some looked decades old. Others looked newer. You kept all of these? I asked softly. He nodded. Every year. Emotion caught unexpectedly in my throat. 22 years. 22 years of remembering someone who could not remember him back. I picked up one of the cranes and smiled through tears I no longer bothered hiding. Ethan watched me quietly. Then he said the one thing neither of us had realized we needed to hear. You do not have to remember everything to know who you are. The words settled gently into the empty places inside me. And in that moment I finally understood something. The story was never about the memories I lost. It was about the people who never stopped holding them for me until I came home.